Hello. Holy cow. Woo! Can you keep a secret? In all the years I've been hosting these talks, authors, artists, historians, performers, this was the largest pre-registration I've ever seen. Welcome to the Mill Valley Public Library. It is so good to see you all. How many here are members of the Historical Society? Almost knocked me over. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all that. Your membership does so much for the Historical Society in so many ways, so we really appreciate your support. And welcome to those who are not members. The first thing we like to do before we even begin the presentations is the Historical Society would first like to thank the Mill Valley Public Library for allowing us to host our first Wednesday speaker series here. Thank you very much. One of the ways that we show our appreciation for the use of this beautiful space is to help at the end of the talk to put the room back into order, and we really rely on your assistance to do so. So after the talk and after the Q&A, and while we're schmoozing and spending community time together, and maybe you'll talk to our speaker, we would appreciate if you could help us fold up the chairs and put them on the rack. So thanks in advance for that. I'm really excited about tonight's talk, Mill Valley Secret Places with Phil Rhodes. Phil and I have worked together in the past with the Historical Society. I first came to know him when I was working on one of the Historical Society's history walks, and we had a nice communication, and both of us quite curious and wanting to get things right and accurate. And then when it was my turn to write a walk in 2017, I started thinking about how nice it would be to include so many things that I've wondered about in Mill Valley, but really didn't know the genesis of, such as the mosaic at the El Paseo. And where did that come from? You know, who made that? What's the story behind that anyway? And so who are you going to call? Phil Rhodes. This guy is stealthy. He is such a researcher. He became, for me, my touchstone, my accuracy meter. And indeed, he found out things that 20 years and I still couldn't get the answers to. So who did make that mosaic at El Paseo? According to Phil, and he had evidence to show that it was so, it was Gus Costigan, who helped design and build El Paseo for Edna Foster. And it was he and his crew that gifted that to the El Paseo, and it was created by Alan Stretter. Then that got me thinking, okay, how about that mosaic over by the bus stop? That's trippy. I mean, what's the story with that? Could not find a thing out about it. Who are you going to call? Phil. Well, Phil quickly explained to me that that mosaic had been made by one of the premier mosaic artists in the Bay Area, Alfonso Pardinas. Yes, Alfonso Pardinas. His work is seen at BART stations all over the Bay Area, in some of the most landmark buildings in San Francisco, and in movies, Francis Ford Coppola movies. And he lived here in Mill Valley. It's things like this that have set Phil apart in my mind. Now, he's shy, or humble, I should say, and he asked me not to talk to, not to brag about him too much, but I do, so don't listen, Phil. He has qualities, I think, that really do create the perfect recipe for the perfect investigator. He's patient, he's tenacious, he's stubborn. He goes down in that computer, that requires patience, he'll go in And he won't come out whatever rabbit holes he goes down till he's extracted information. Not everybody can do that. But he's peripatetic by nature. He moves around Mill Valley like a, stealthy ghost, collecting tells that reach into the past. We've had many walking adventures, and what to me is probably a river rock, it will be Phil that knows that to be the remnants of a bridge. What is just a regular pair of stairs on Throckmorton, those stairs actually, as I learned from Phil, are the remnants or the leftover of what had once been a hotel. So when you walk with Phil, you see things the way he sees things, which is a special and unique kind of clarity. And that is why I am so glad he agreed to talk tonight and to share with us all Mill Valley's secret places. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Phil Rhodes.
Thank you, Deborah. Now, can you hear me? So as long as this doesn't fall off, then we're good to go. This was planned to be an interactive event with audience participation. And when we planned it, I was thinking we might have 30 or 40 people and be downstairs. Well, it's really a testament to the kind of people who live in Mill Valley that they're interested in this kind of thing. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight. It's very much appreciated. But I think we're going to have a few ground rules to keep things moving along. And one is I still intend to have some interaction during the presentation. The thing I most dislike about sitting in an audience during a talk is there's a lot of times I want to say something in the middle, and I have to keep my mouth shut. So when some of these images come up, you may hear me say, do you know where that is? Or where is that? Or what is that? And if you are very sure you know, then I'm not going to ask for hands. I want you to just yell it out. And that may result in a chorus, and it may result in silence. We'll find out. I have basically, it's a little bit like a Mill Valley walk into history. There's 21 stops, and we'll cover as many as we have time for. It looks like we have about an hour. And then I want to leave, we need to be done by 8:30. I want to leave a little time for Q&A and perhaps some discussion. And the other thing I want to mention that when it comes to questions, I have no notes at all. And I'm not good at remembering street addresses. So if you ask me the exact street address, I'll say, well, I'm not sure. I'll say the closest side street or something like that. Ideally, those kind of questions we can leave for the Q&A. And with that, I think I'll get started. So this is a question. Looking at this, who knows where that picture is? And if you know where it is, do you know who the photographer was? And if you're really smart, do you know what the picture is of? Okay. This is a photo on the wall of Wells Fargo Bank on Miller Avenue, almost across the street from the now closed Book Depot. And with that, I'm going to move forward. Where was the picture? That is the picture there. I must be blocking it. It's a very large. It's one of 5 very large murals on the wall of the Wells Fargo office. And I'm not pushing Wells Fargo, but it is historical information. In 1956, the bank there was called the American Trust Company, which eventually merged with Wells Fargo, and then it became Wells Fargo. Before that, earlier on, it had been the Mill Valley Bank. So the building itself has very old roots. So this is some information. And if you look there at the bottom left, let's see if my pointer works. I got to get used to it. right there. It says Mill Valley. The Mill Valley Wells Fargo is the last Wells Fargo in the North Bay that still has the Ansel Adams photographs. All the other Wells Fargos in the North Bay have been torn down. You can go to Berkeley and you're in luck, but nothing else in the North Bay. So this is the article announcing the American Trust Company remodeling and the Ansel Adams photos on the wall. It's the longest running photo exhibit in Mill Valley that I know of, been going for 63 years. And then I went into Wells Fargo office yesterday, and maybe I'm missing the news, but I was blown away by this wonderful mural on the wall. And I guess it's been there a few months, and I know some folks in the Historical Society probably know all about it. I didn't know about it. Walk in and take a look at it. It's beautiful. And then by the door, there's an explanation of everything in the photo. Now we're going to move on to our second subject. Anyone know what this is and where it is?
Railroad bridge. Railroad bridge.
It's not a railroad bridge. It is a wood crib dam on Lagunitas Creek. It was the dam that provided water power for Samuel P. Taylor's mill. Now you'll ask, why am I showing something outside of Mill Valley? Carry on. This is the downstream side of the dam. This is the upstream side of the dam. And if you look very closely, let me try this again. Here. This area, these are wooden boards, two layers of wooden boards, and they're placed there and they stop the water from leaking through. After the boards are placed, they get wet, the wood expands and creates a tight seal. I saw these pictures online. They're from the Antique Kent, California room several years ago, and I said, oh, interesting. And then this will lead to the next. This was the first sawmill built in Northern California in 1834, Cooper's Mill near Santa Rosa on Mark West Creek, just off the Russian River. It had a reciprocal saw similar to what we think was at the old mill. Its dam was washed out in a flood in 1841. So I was standing on the old mill one day and I looked down and I saw all these logs lined up coming out of the embankment and cross logs, several cross logs going the other way. And then I saw this thing here. And coming in a little closer from the other direction. And then I said, I'll be damned. It's John Reed's dam. It's a wood crib dam, the original 180-year-old wood, still there. The dam was torn out by floods. We don't know when. It could have been the Great Flood in 1862. Could have been sometime before that or sometime after that. So here's one of our earliest pictures of the old mill, 1880s. If you look down there at the bottom, you'll see a bunch of logs. Those are the blown out logs from the wood crib dam, blown out by the flood. Because they were saturated with water, they didn't float downstream, but sank to the bottom after the flood pushed them out. So we know exactly where John Reed's dam was and how it was built. And this is a enlargement of the previous image, and if you look there, you'll see a redwood post, sawn post with a crossbeam at the top. This is the remains of the flume supports. So from the top of the dam, there was a flume running from the dam to the mill wheel. And it's apparent from this that the water flowed over the top of the mill wheel and either turned it counterclockwise or clockwise. Here's another photo, early photo. Again, you see the logs blown out from the dam. So there's been some studies of tree ring cores, especially in Muir Woods. These are some of the Muir Woods cores. And the beautiful thing about redwoods and other trees is from these cores taken from inside the tree, there's rings. The rings are wide in good years and skinny in bad years. And from that, we can come up with dating. So you can date any tree. A tree has fallen, you do a core in it with an increment borer like this, and you can find out typically the exact year the tree was cut. So with the city's permission, we have the ability to find out exactly when the old mill was built. Heretofore, there's been a question. It could have been the late 1830s. It could have been the early 1840s. We have the ability. I don't like red tape, though. I haven't gone to the city, but we can determine that. So to me, this was one of the most exciting things I discovered on one of my walks. Now, anybody know where this is? No. Any other ideas? Nope. On the way to what tree? Nope. Okay, so I'm very happy because I know you're learning new things tonight. This is very close to the top of the Dipsea Stairs. If you go to the very top of the Dipsea Stairs and turn right on Edgewood Avenue and look down the hill, you will come to this grove. And my previous talk was leading into the fact that, contrary to popular legend, all of Mill Valley was not logged. The south side of town on the William Richardson Rancho was, except for some poaching on the borders, was not logged. That's why we have Muir Woods. That's why we have Steep Ravine. And that's why we have some other virgin redwood stands between Mill Valley and the coast. Here's another picture of it. I will talk a little bit later about that pool. Actually, I'll talk about it now, but I think that was put in by in the 1920s by a resident who lived a little bit up Edgewood. He lived with a photographer, Edwin Worman Binkley, who I also talk about. And they knew people like Dorothea Lange and perhaps Ansel Adams and a lot of famous artists and photographers in the 1920s. So who knows who has been in that pool? I've been walking by there since I was a kid, and it never appealed to me. And this is a redwood just down the street, and another grove that has been damaged by home construction. This tree is, I believe, could be the oldest single-trunked redwood in Mill Valley. I'm guessing it's 500 to 1,000 years old. Like a lot of redwood trees in this area, it's had its top blown off in storms hundreds of years ago and had several new branches coming up. So it's not that tall. It is pretty big, and it's got all these like warts and burls all over it. It's an amazing tree. If the 3-foot rule around the houses were enforced that they're talking about, it would have to be cut down. So the Edgewood Grove that I'm talking about, you will see that it was, at one time, it was the signature grove of Mill Valley. It appeared in many photographs and paintings of Mill Valley. And in 1903, you probably can't read this was the formation of the Tamalpais National Park Association. And it was on the brochure. You can see the Edgewood Grove on the left, which I call it Edgewood Grove, and Mount Tamalpais. I'm just going to show some more pictures. Here's another picture. Here's a picture taken from Mount Tamalpais around 1900. And if you look along here, you'll see a road. And up here, you'll see a road. That's Edgewood Avenue. At the time, it was actually on the edge of the woods. Now, as you know, there's woods everywhere. We have very few open grasslands around Mill Valley anymore. Here's another picture from the other direction. You see a Cowboy Rock and Castle Rock down here, the head of Tamalpais Canyon. You'll see the scar of Belvedere Reservoir, which I'll talk about later. And you'll see the grove here. See the railroad grade on Mount Tam. It was about 1910. 1913 picture of bicyclists coming down Edgewood past the grove. There's been bicycling on Mount Tam going back to the late 1890s. It was what passed for mountain biking. And this again on the left, you see part of the grove, and a family called the Victorinos lived nearby. And this is they had a hayfield, and some of their kids are out there piling up the hay. And then this is the painting, and I don't know why these little arrows appear on everything, but we'll just kind of ignore them. You see the Edgewood Grove there on the left, and Mount Tamalpais, and it's a very long photo at the back of the City Council chamber. Thank you. Thank you, Franklin. It's almost impossible to get the whole thing in because of an ill-placed ceiling fan. Picture from the 1920s. At the top of the Dipsy stairs, there was a Victorinos built a nice little rest area, and it looks like their cow is checking out the picnickers. It's a stereo image from the California State Library. And then this is a little later, and I apologize for the gun, but in the 1950s, we kids had toy guns. You'll see the grove in the upper left-hand corner part of it, and then you'll see the area at the top used to be the pasture trees. The grove itself is hard to even see anymore. There's so many trees around it. I'm in this picture. I was 5 years old, waiting for the bus, and that's when I started going by the grove. These old-growth trees are off Florence Avenue. They have burn scars from the fire that burned up the south side of Mill Valley in the 1880s. It was the last fire to burn this part of Mill Valley. The trees are gradually closing in around the scars, and in maybe another 50 years or so, they will completely enclose a scar if there's not another fire, and you will never know there was a fire. I talked to the owner of the house here. He's very much in love with these trees. They're on a city easement. The city's talking about putting in an SLP here, but there's some opposition, and I would certainly be concerned over the effect on the roots. Also, I will mention that there's probably more logging of redwoods going on now in Mill Valley than in any time since the gold rush era. Some people are overreacting to the hype on fires. Other people are just being told by tree trimming companies who want to get rich that you need to cut down your redwood trees. So here's some logs piled up in someone's yard. I don't know what they're going to do with them. Okay, next subject. Where is it? Yes, next to Boyle Park. Now this is a gravel road, and you'll notice a fence next to it. Boyle Park is in the trees behind it. And here's another picture of it. In the wintertime, it's a shortcut. It connects Delcasa with Elm, the lower end of Warner Canyon. It's a nice shortcut. It's got the largest freshwater lakes in Mill Valley in the winter. Some of the potholes are 10 feet across, at least a foot deep. Now this is August, and even in August, there's potholes with water in them. So here's a map from 1859. I don't expect you to be able to read this, but here you'll see it says Wood Road, and this says fence, and it shows a fence line. This is the first picture you saw. This was a logging road where they brought logs down from what was later called Warner Canyon during the gold rush. They hauled them through here, down past the Reed Hacienda to the Reed Landing. and then they were barged off either to the mill in Sausalito that was running then, or to San Francisco where they were used for pilings on the wharfs. During the gold rush, San Francisco was like a black hole. It was sucking resources out of the entire Bay Area. There were thousands and thousands of beef cattle on the ranchos all around San Francisco. Within a couple of years, there were none. The redwood trees were cut progressively outward, and one of the easiest places to reach was Mill Valley. So the redwoods on the Reed Rancho, which is more the eastern part of Mill Valley, Warner Canyon, Blithedale Canyon, were logged, and there was poaching also on parts of the Reed Rancho. Some of these things, if you don't know what they are, I'm sorry, I can't explain. Now, this is an 1869 map, and on here, you will see the Reed Landing. It's somewhat near the community center and somewhat near the middle school. And then you see the Reed Rancho buildings here. And then this little line is the road. And then up here you see El Denos. That was Louis Denos' store where he sold provisions and liquor. This was approximately where the monkey puzzle tree is on Elm. If you're going eastbound in East Blithedale, you turn left on Elm at Park School and go up the street. About halfway up, there's an SLP, and there was in that area was the Louis Denos store, established around 1860 and was run until he was kicked off by Hugh Boyle about 1870. Oops. And then this is an article talking about the 1864 election. Reed Rancho Precinct, polls to be held at Denos store. E. Wormuth, inspector. We'll be talking about him. This was electors' second election of Abraham Lincoln. I don't know how Mill Valley voted. Probably the first election actually held in Mill Valley. It wasn't Mill Valley yet. Okay, and I'm just going to go back here again, and I'm going to show you over here in the set. It says E. Wormuth. You probably can't read it. That is Ebenezer Wormuth's house. It is very close to where Pharmaca is. Okay, where is this? Mill Valley Tennis Club? No. Scott Valley, yes. So this is very close to the Scott Valley, Swim and Tennis Club. And this is the original county road that ran from Sausalito to San Rafael, constructed in the early 1870s. And it's basically unchanged, never been paved. You can walk a nearly 150-year-old road here. And this rock I call the place where the stagecoach robbers hid. Don't go up there today, it's covered with poison oak. View looking down the road. And here's the road on a 1884 map. You can see Alto there. I think you can read that, lower center. North is at the top, so it's going up what's now called Scott Valley, through a gap and straight down into Corte Madera. And it's very interesting that there's two sections of the wild road, the unpaved road. One is south of the swim club and the other is north. This is the gate on the northern section. It's on Coach Road. How did it get the name Coach Road? I wonder. Here's a gate, lock gate. Now I want to mention that Scott Valley is a place where there's very few ways you can drive in and out. The residents like it that way. Keeps traffic down, keeps unwanted people out. But we know from past experiences when the Diablo winds blow, they blow more from east to west. So most likely a fire comes in from the east, it's going to blow across our canyons. If you're in the upper end of the canyon and there's a fire lower down, you might be trapped. This is the best way to escape to Corte Madera if you live in the upper end of Scott Valley. It's locked. I may get in trouble for saying this, but if you live in Upper Scott Valley, I suggest you buy a very large pair of bolt cutters. Because we don't know if anybody's going to show up with the key to these locks if there's a fire raging. And bicycles are not popular in Scott Valley, so not many people have a bicycle either. And you've seen from the pictures from the fires that if you are in a car and at least you can move, you have a chance of escaping. If you have to walk, And here's looking down, looking south on that section, and here's the gate on the Corte Madera end. We're still in the Scott Valley watershed, but this is Corte Madera. Corte Madera slops over into Mill Valley. We should take it back someday. Now, guess the name of the street. Sausalito Street. Here's the gate from the other side. Lock and chain. You got to cut 2 chains. You want to get out. Or if you're in Corte Madera and it's burning from that side, you'll still want to cut it. The road is pretty good. I think it could be driven in any car. And this is the Corte Madera side. And I would suggest if you have nothing better to do that you turn off 101 at Tamalpais Boulevard or go over the old grade. And Sausalito Street is on the south side of Tamalpais, and it goes directly up the canyon to the ridge crest. And you will see it gets very steep. And that's one reason why this road was replaced eventually by our current old Corte Madera grade. Because this part is less steep, the further up it's even more steep. Okay, what's this? It does look like a well. What's the building behind it? Okay, I know at least one person knows. This is what's called the Blithedale Milk House. It's very close to where the old Blithedale Hotel was in Blithedale Canyon. Tim Wood, a descendant of the Cushing family, will be talking about Blithedale Hotel 2 months from now. Be sure to attend. I would love it if he gets to talk up here because that means there is interest. He's a wonderful person. So this is a current photo, and this is a photo with the milk house in the background taken on July 4th. It's either 1888 or 1889. The building was already old then. It's without a doubt the oldest structure in Mill Valley. I don't count the old mill because it's, first of all, it's been essentially completely replaced, and it's not a real building anyway. But we don't know when it was built. And then here's a picture taken about 1912. You'll see the milk house in the lower right, and the foundation of the Blithedale Hotel out of the hotel was torn down. And up there you see this gigantic building. It was the Mill Valley Sanitarium. It was a combination facility for people with tuberculosis and also mentally ill people. Some of the mentally ill people wandered off, and there were some who committed suicide. It didn't last too long. It was probably about the largest building in Mill Valley. Here's a picture taken of a little girl by the milk house about 100 years ago, and approximately same location today. Here's a couple of close pictures. It's basically a combination of stones and what appears to be adobe. So they often call it an adobe, although it's not pure adobe. This adobe is exposed to the elements. I can't believe that it's held up but there it is. Okay. Where is this? Millwood, yes. This house is, according to everything I've determined, is not considered historic by the Mill Valley Historical Society. It's not considered historic by the city of Mill Valley, even though it's one of the very oldest and most historically significant homes in Mill Valley. Hint, hint to people on the Historical Society board. Ebenezer Wermuth. This was his home. In September 1899, he hung himself in the bedroom of this home. It's now rented out. I met the lady who rents it. She showed me inside, and I mentioned, did you know a guy hung himself in here? She took it very well. The house has been added on to, but it's very cool inside, and it hasn't been updated, completely updated, and since the 1920s or 1930s. Here's a blurry photo of the house in the 1913 snow, which is when it snowed down to sea level all over Marin County. There's 2 or 3 inches of snow on the valley floor. You can see it's had it's not as big as it is now. And then this is going to be, because this is not very bright, you're going to have trouble seeing it, but this is 1898, downtown Mill Valley, the railroad station at the time there at the right. And Wermuth's house is circled there. This building is still there. It's across the street from Pharmaca. It was discussed on the 2018 History Walk. Here's an 1892 map showing the Wermuth house, what was then called Blithedale Road or County Road. There was no east on it then. The North Pacific Coast Railroad line in the lower left, and the Madera Creek is the line down there, also in the lower part. And this is Ebenezer Wermuth. He was very famous. He was headlines in the San Francisco paper. He was quite an eccentric. He wore overalls all the time. He was called a miser. He was kind of a grumpy guy. He wasn't approachable. He carried on a nearly 40-year legal battle with the Gardner family, including Jacob Gardner. And Jacob's granddaughter was big in the Historical Society, so he was a person that wasn't talked about for many years. I don't believe in whitewashing history, but he took his land case. He had a claim to this land in Mill Valley, about 40 acres. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court. By the time it got to the Supreme Court, he was dead, but he left enough money in his will for his attorney to finish it, and he won. His heirs got the land, and it became the Sunnyside Tract, and one of the nicest parts of Mill Valley. So at the bottom there, I don't expect you to read it. It's a headline talking about, he was dying of stomach cancer. He was on morphine. There's a lot of detail about exactly how he hung himself. Some people thought it was staged, and after he was buried, there was rumors that his body was dug up, and somebody pulled out his stomach because they thought he'd been poisoned, but apparently there was no truth to that. But a couple of years before he died, there was a story that he'd gotten a bunch of gold and hidden it on his property. And he was beaten up once or twice. It was never said whether these people found the gold, whether he recovered the gold or did something with it, or it's still somewhere around 32 Millwood. Okay, I'll bet you nobody knows where this is. Walking all over Mill Valley for 50, 60 years, I never noticed it till a couple of years ago. It's an old utility cover, MCW CO, Marin County Water Company. And since you don't know where it is, I will tell you it's in front of the place that sells unusual toilet paper, usually with a president's face on it. And if you don't know where that is, I'm not going to tell you. So the Marin County Water Company was the first water company in Marin County. It was started by William Tell Coleman, who many historical people know of. He was a large landowner in Marin. Earlier on, he had been a villageante in San Francisco during the gold rush. And he and the Marin County Water Company built Lake Lagunitas Dam, which is now our oldest Marin Municipal Water District lake. So that utility cover downtown could date anywhere from 1871 to sometime after 1900, when the Marin County Water Company was absorbed by its successors. The Marin County Water Company, to my knowledge, never served a Mill Valley. So how the heck it got there is still a mystery. It's a secret. Okay, this house. Oakdale, yes. This is not a current image, but I'm showing this one first because this was a house built on the Gardner tract, Jacob Gardner. This was the land that he did have. He was fighting for Worman's land south of Oakdale, but that he didn't get it. I think, or thought, it was architecturally rather unusual. The area in front was added on maybe 50, 60 years ago. The rest of it is fairly unchanged. Here's a picture of it around 1902 when the Sunnyside tract was being developed. You may be able to read the sign that says $300 for a lot. You can see Oakdale, Buena Vista, and Hill Street, and the house on Oakdale is circled. So Gardner tract, having been opened up in 1895, already had quite a few houses on it. The Sunnyside tract below Oakdale had nothing at that point. Now, the old man who lived there, I didn't know him. He died, and they rented it out for a while, and then somebody bought it. And they started the usual renovation. And you know how these renovations go. They do a little bit, they finish that part, and then they tear down more of the house. And this is what it looks like now. It's essentially lost. There's a couple of shingles left on it, but it's essentially lost all its character. It's a peeve with mine. I'm trying to show you the things that are still here in Mill Valley. This is something that we lost, in my opinion. Okay, where is this? The lady who said railroad grade is pretty close, but it's not the railroad grade. It is in Blithedale Canyon, and off to the left you would have the creek there. This is an original part of Corte Madera Avenue, as it appeared in the 1890s when it was built. At this time, Corte Madera Avenue went along the railroad tracks on the west side of the creek, and then at a point where the railroad tracks crossed over to the east side of the creek, just this downtown side of between King Street and Lee Street, Corte Madera Avenue went on the side of the hill, and then it dead-ended at the Marsh property, and I will be talking about George Marsh a little bit later, and did a sharp U-turn up Marguerite. So Corte Madera ended and went up Marguerite. This is not the same place, but this is what it would have been like traveling on it in the 1890s. Here's another view. I like to go, it's going back in time here. It's a short SLP, but very nice. So you walk up Marguerite, and you probably can't read the sign on top, but it says Elaine Avenue. Now, Elaine Street is a side street off Marguerite. It goes up the hill and eventually connects with Ralston Avenue. It's one of the only streets that connects with Ralston Avenue, which, if you know that area, it goes a long, long, windy street that goes all the way across the upper part of Blithedale Canyon. Dead end ahead. Here's the dead end. Then it turns into a dirt road, and if you were to walk on that SLP for about a quarter mile, you would come to pavement, and that pavement would take you up to Ralston. And if you turned around at Ralston, you'd see a sign that says evacuation route. So if you're on Ralston and it's burning on both ends of Ralston, and you want to get down in your car, you want to take a lane. You can drive down a lane, all the way down. I've done it, just to test it. Now, take a look at this locked gate. There's no lock on it. You can't really see it, but the chain is just loosely hung on a knob. So you can open the gate. No worries, no bolt cutter needed. I guess the neighbors know and they're okay with it, and I guess not too many cars drive down. But it's one of my secrets. I am telling you guys about escape routes. And there's others that I didn't have time to cover. Now, very close to the old section of Corte Madera Avenue is Blithedale Park. And that was the old George Turner Marsh property, which I will get to. Actually, I'm getting to now, and I'm giving this away. But as you start walking up the trail, not the steep fire road that goes up left of Marsh Street or Marsh Avenue, but you go down, go across the creek and up. I've been on it many times, and I noticed this thing on the side. And I looked at the top, and I noticed kind of a flower motif. And it turns out it's the base of a Japanese stone lantern. It's the last Japanese artifact of George Turner Marsh's Japanese village. Thank God it's in a city park. So this was the entrance to George Turner Marsh's Japanese village. He was an Australian-born importer, settled in San Francisco, had a Japanese import store, and was fascinated with all things Japanese. So in the early 1890s, he bought a property. I'm glad I can see the clock. I've still got plenty of time. In the early 1890s, he bought this property and built a Japanese village. Very authentic. He used Japanese carpenters. And unfortunately, it burned in the 1899 fire. The 1899 fire started in Corte Madera. The devil wind, the easterly wind, it was late summer, early fall, burned over the ridge, burned out Warner Canyon, went over, burned out Blithedale Canyon. And unfortunately, at that time, there were very few homes. It took out the Japanese village. It burned down to the Blithedale Resort and almost burned the Blithedale Hotel. This grand gate, George Turner Marsh put at what became the Japanese Tea Garden, which was at the San Francisco Midwinter International Exhibition in 1893-94. And I believe it stayed there for a long time, so it didn't burn up in 1899. So Marsh is generally considered, and here's an advertisement for his Japanese village. It wasn't called the Tea Garden yet, at the exhibition. And they had what was called, let's see here. Anyway, they had rickshaws, and there was, they ended up using, apparently that there was concern about using, making Japanese Americans pull the rickshaws. So he decided to use Germans, this is the story, and paint their faces. And this is one of these, there's a lot of racism in history, but I believe in telling things as they happen. So the Hajiwara family, they got the concession for the Japanese tea garden, and they operated it, I think it was $50 a month from the city of San Francisco up until 1942. And during the anti-Japanese hysteria, they were forced to move to the camps and remove all their stuff. And they had a huge collection of Japanese artifacts. And Samuel Newsom, a Mill Valley resident, agreed to store 32 truckloads at his Mill Valley, one of his Mill Valley locations. So Mill Valley started the Japanese tea garden, and Mill Valley saved the Japanese tea garden. And here's I don't know if it's still there, but there's a plaque for George Turner Marsh in the Japanese tea garden. And there's still a lot of Japanese things in Mill Valley. This is a Japanese gate. It's pronounced T-O-R-I-I. I think it might be called Tori. The house behind it is going to be rebuilt, or I think actually torn down and rebuilt. Okay, anybody know where this is? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Because I didn't remember that. I knew it was about 300. So this is the remains of a 1890s Mill Valley garden. And here's a picture of the same fountain back then. Some of the same palms are still there. It's open, you can walk in off the street, it's pretty overgrown. But this was the residence of the Bingham family. And they had a daughter named Helen Bingham, who wrote a book called In Tamerlan, which a few of you may have seen in 1906. A wonderful book. You can get it used online, fairly expensive. And in the book In Tamerlan, this is the Corte Madera Creek behind their house, near 305 Miller. And here's the same location today. And, of course, lots more trees, but there's still a bridge over the creek in about the same location. Where is this? Yes. It's Edgewood, I think they call it Edgewood Park. It's where the old Belvedere reservoir was. I took this last year, shortly after they had a small grass fire. The city was quite proud of the fact that they'd weed whacked the area not long before. So they put the fire out pretty promptly. A little bit hard to see, but this is the original reservoir that used to be there was put in about 1902. Water was piped down from Mount Tam on a pipeline, which became the Pipeline Trail. And I don't know if you can see that number 1, but that's the reservoir. It was a lot fuller then than it was later. And as Chuck Oldenburg said in one of his vignettes, it had some leaks. So eventually they had to lower the level. Now, when I was a boy, I lived at 2 houses on Edgewood, and this is what it looked like when I was 14. The water, the color picture's kind of faded, but the water had this beautiful swimming pool blue. It had a falling down barbed wire fence around it. We kids would go through it, go down to a gently sloping area, and some of the braver kids would go swimming. Now, we did not necessarily know at the time that this was already purified drinking water. But we did know from hiking the pipeline trail that the old pipe dating from 1900 was wearing out. It had holes in it. And you could see the holes in the trail in the drinking water running in through the hole. And if you were not careful, you would knock dirt into the hole. No one got sick. The dirt in the foreground here was when they were constructing the huge water tank, which replaced it. Now I know at least one person here who knows exactly where this picture is. Does anybody else other than him know where this is? It is on the railroad grade. This is Fern Canyon, where the railroad grade makes a sharp curve. I had to merge several photos to get this view of it. And here's part of it during the railroad era. You can see a very early gravity car right there. It might be number 2. Fred is here, might know. There's some better postcards that show the whole U, but I couldn't find one. And then I just threw this in, but does anybody know where this is?
East Peak Summit.
It's the gravity car barn at the East Peak, yes. On a wet day, I think it was September last year, the first rain we had. Now this one I can't tell you that, I can't ask where this is because if you can read, it says West Point Inn. I wish I'd caught that, I would have blacked that out. But I'm moving a little bit far afield because these are all places I've walked or ridden my bike that I love. So this picture was taken anywhere from 1904 to 1907, and here's what it looks like today. And this is what I wish we had more of. I know in this rich town, people want to remodel, redo, upgrade, modernize, because they're living their lives and they want the best they can have. Thank God that this one place, that attitude does not prevail. And here's the second fireplace in a room that was an addition to the West Point Inn, built about 1920, with some wonderful photos I won't talk about, but they have their own story. This is a picture in the kitchen. And this is a picture of one of the rooms in the main hotel. It's got a lot of cabins. But I was talking with one Mill Valley resident at the Gravity Car Barn, which is one of my volunteer jobs, and she never knew about it. And I told her that you can actually stay there, and she was quite excited. But I also note that a lot of times we locals don't see the places in our backyard. I've never spent a night there. This was on a history walk, so if you went on the history walk this year, you should know what this is.
Hotel. Steps.
It was the steps to the Hotel Madera. It's on East Blithedale Street. It's roughly across the street from Mill Valley Beer Works. And here is on the left, you can see the same stairs behind a wagon and horses. And the man holding the reins is author Jack London, who visited Mill Valley in 1911. I go back here. Up here, you can see the brand new Mill Valley Library. And that's the Hotel Madera, where we think Jack London and his wife Charmian may have stayed. Here they are in front of the stables, Dowd Stables, with the original Mill Valley Market behind it. And then this is a painting that it's no longer on display, but it was at the House of Happy Walls, which is the Charmian London House at Jack London State Historic Park. And I'm throwing this in because this is an illustration from Jack London's short story set in Mill Valley called When the World Was Young. And the story goes as a fellow's riding his bicycle down a hill at night in Mill Valley. They were all dirt roads, had a crash, and was fumbling around in the dark. And he found this naked guy running around in the dark. And so I guess London knew about our Mill Valley eccentrics. They put this picture was used in the magazine. It was published in, so they put something on the guy. Not one of London's best short stories, but worth a read. If you look hard enough, you can find it online. Okay, I don't think anyone's going to know where this is unless you own the house. So I will move right on. The picture I just showed you was from down the hill below. I didn't want to trespass too much. But this is at 362 Edgewood. It's basically midway between the old reservoir and Edgewood Grove. This home was originally built around 1910 or so by the painter Clarkson Dye. He did not like it, so he moved out, and he rented it out to a photographer named Edwin Worman Binkley. Now, Binkley is probably the most prolific and, in a sense, in terms of what he did, the most important photographer in Mill Valley history who actually lived here. He took most of the pictures of the 1922 Tamalpais snow. He took many, if not most of the pictures of the Mountain Railroad being torn up. And he was a very sentimental guy. When the old train station was torn down in 1928 and the current one was put in 1929, he lamented the loss of the old station and had pictures for sale of the old station. In the attic of this house around 1970, they found several thousand of his negatives. They went to the Bancroft Library, except for a few that were grabbed by Lucretia Little. So we have, in the history room, we have a small assortment of his work. Here he is in front of his house with his beloved motorcycle, which he called Hen. Now, he had good friends, these two ladies who were running the Mill Valley paper and the Mill Valley Record in the 1920s and 30s. And even though he was quite eccentric, really weird, and he talked so much, people called him the parson because he was always sermonizing. But all of his writings in the paper were addressed to Hen. So if you read any of his stuff, it says Hen this, Hen that. It was a long time before I knew he was talking about his motorcycle. And here he is in his house. There's a lot of stories behind this. He had a collection of hundreds of clocks, and the decibels at noon every day were incredible. He had a male longtime companion, and when they weren't speaking to each other, they would sit at opposite ends of the table, each playing solitaire. I never knew he had a gun, but there is a gun there. Okay, this was on the ad. Do you know what it is? Okay, there is a bench at the side of the book depot, and it's got a little plaque on it, which I don't show, but it's apparently the last remaining bench of a bench that was used at several Marin railroad stations from about 1915 to the 1930s. And here's another picture of it. It had cast concrete supports and then redwood planks at the side, at the back, and the seat. And that's the plaque at the depot. And then this is at the Mill Valley Station, 1920s. One of those could be the same bench. another picture with the benches. A lot of the pictures have two benches. Picture there at the bench at the left. This was around 1940, just before the electric trains stopped running. And then here's not a very good picture, but a picture at the last Tavern of Tamalpais after the railroad tracks were torn up. Behind the man on the left, you will see one of the benches there. There's two benches. I slightly suspect that those may have been taken from the downtown Mill Valley station and put up at the summit station at the Tavern of Tamalpais, but I don't know for sure. There are pictures of the Northwestern Pacific stations all over Marin that show the same type of benches, but I don't have any to show you. Okay. Were they that type? So it would be nice if there were more. For now, I would really love it if the City Department of Public Works would dismantle that bench, make a template of the concrete so it can be reproduced. It's small enough to be picked up and put in the back of someone's truck. And I really, really hope that doesn't happen because it might be the last one. So this is a Tartan Trail in Scott Highlands. It goes off Tartan Road or Tartan Street. It's a short trail which connects with a trail going off the end of Eleanor Avenue. And here's another picture of it. And in the foreground, you will see huckleberries. Huckleberries are a relative to the blueberry. They're smaller. They're more flavorful. They make good jam. They make good pies. They're very common and popular in the Northwest. And they're very, very common in Point Reyes National Seashore under the Douglas fir as an understory shrub in the Douglas fir forest. If you get there before the professional pickers have, picking is allowed in the National Seashore. And if you catch them right, they are wonderful. We've collected quartz. Here's a picture taken a couple of weeks ago of huckleberries on the Sierra Trail, which goes right off panoramic between the Mountain Home and Boot Jack. There's parking. You can get to the huckleberry bushes within a few minutes walk. However, when I went there a couple of weeks ago, it had been mostly picked over. This is a hazelnut. Very, very common all over Mill Valley, even on the streets. It's generally called a tree in Mill Valley. It's more of a shrub. 15, 20 years ago, I used to see a lot of the nuts. They have like stinging nettles on the husk. You need gloves to pick them. They're good. They're not as big as cultivated hazelnuts. Unfortunately, our squirrel population has expanded greatly in recent years, and you almost don't see them at all anymore. So how am I doing on time? I think I'm almost at the end, so we're working out. Okay, this is the Emerson tree. Guess where it is? Muir Woods. It's not on any maps that I know of. It's not on any signs. It's not on any trails. It was an important event when they put the plaque up in 1903, but it's like a lot of things been largely forgotten. Here's a closer look at the plaque. If you want to see the tree, the plaque is facing the creek in Muir Woods. And this is the Pinchot Monument on the main trail. And the Emerson tree is the large tree on the right. You have to walk off trail where it says, please stay on path. Walk around the right side and the back and you will see the Emerson. Secret, that's a secret. Shh. Okay, what's this? And I believe this is our last, oh, we're doing perfectly on time. This is our last stop. No. This is on Summit Avenue, not too far up from the bottom. This is the stairs as they appear today. And there's the stairs at the bottom as they appeared about 100 years ago. They were one of the stairways leading up to the old Summit School. The school is gone, but there's 2 stairways on this side and further down the street that lead up to the old school site. And with that, I conclude, and thank you very much.
Any questions?
We have, what, another 10 minutes or so for questions?
I think about 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay.
Questions?
Sir?
Mountain Home Inn.
What about the Mountain Home Inn?
The history of the Mountain Home Inn.
Okay.
Repeat the question.
Sure.
He wants to know about the history of the Mountain Home Inn. I do know the history of the Mountain Home Inn, and I know along with the history of hundreds of other places. And if you guys want to spend the night and give me a little more time to prepare, I would be more than happy. This is really a very, very small selection of all the wonderful history we have in Mill Valley. And I apologize that I missed covering something that's important to you, because it is important. Next question. Sir?
You showed a picture of the oldest tree in Mill Valley near the beginning.
Yes.
Is that tree still living?
Yes.
It sort of looked like it was shook.
Well, I would be worried if I lived in the house next to it. And it is the oldest single trunk tree, but there's a circle of trees, redwood trees in Old Mill Park, that's a clone. And it's possible that the genetic material in that ring of trees could be 10,000 years old, possibly more. Yes?
Have you heard of Quigley Lodge, which is on a lane near that slide that you showed, the Margarita and Elaine?
Not Quigley Lodge, no.
You have not?
No.
I know somebody who lives in what she says is the carriage house, which is what's left of Quigley Lodge.
Oh,
Elaine.
interesting.
Well, Chuck has looked too.
Have you done a vignette on it yet?
Please repeat the question, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry if you can't hear the lady asked where Quigley Lodge was, and it's a place that was on Elaine Street off Wainwright. And I will try to remember to. There was somebody back here.
Is it true there was a hot spring across the street and the school paved over it? Can you say anything about that?
Okay, she's asking about a hot spring. Are you talking about the mineral spring at Old Mill Park?
The site of the school, so across from
Old Mill
the
School.
and then supposedly it bubbles up through the asphalt, and they have to pave over it.
I will answer you that, and that I'm not aware of any hot springs in Mill Valley. The Sulphur Springs was on the grounds of Old Mill School, and we talked about it on the Walk into History this year that I know not all of you were able to attend, but when we get the guidebook to the Walk into History online, you'll be able to look that up. Sir?
The Swiss Club Tell.
The Swiss Club, he asking about the Swiss Club Tell. Yes, that's right up the street on Edgewood from where I lived. I used to walk by it all the time. I love walking by it, and their old little tramway they used to carry stuff up to it. And I believe, Chuck, you did a vignette on the Swiss Club Tell. Chuck Oldenburg is sitting in the front here. I'm sure most of you have seen his vignettes. They are wonderful. He's my inspiration. And if you Google anything like Swiss Club Tell, you will almost certainly get a hit on Chuck's vignette and on anything else that he's covered, and he's covered hundreds of things.
Okay, one last question.
One last question. Did I miss anybody who'd raised their hand earlier? So, sir?
Quick question. The milk building that you talked about from the Blithedale Hotel,
Okay, the gentleman is asking about the milk house. The milk house is just off West Blithedale Avenue, behind a tall fence, so you can't really see it from the street. Okay, thank you all very much.